In this video, I'm going to be telling you how to sell your HVAC company or other home service company for top dollar with actually doing less work. And the key is not only that you're going to do less work and be able to sell your company for top dollar, the key point to take home here is that by doing less work, you will actually sell your company for top dollar. And I'll explain what I mean. In this video, I'm going to talk about why I was able to get top dollar for my company. Now, when I say top dollar, the reason it was top dollar when I sold, and I'm not going to talk about my particular company sale so much in this video because I talk about that in another video, but I'll make sure to link that video at the end for your convenience in case you're curious about how that actual business sale went down and how much I sold my company for. When you sell a company, the less work you do, the more valuable your company is. And I'll explain what I mean. Think about it this way. Would you rather buy a business that runs itself, has managers in place, and spits off tons of cash? Or would you rather buy a business where the owner does everything and they don't have a lot of systems, they don't have a lot of management, and the employees are constantly asking the owner for advice and what to do on every little thing? It's obvious that you'd probably rather have the first one. I'll give you an example of what this actually looks like in terms of monetary terms. When you look at a $1 million business, at least in the HVAC space, and that is a business that is doing $1 million in gross sales in a year, which is an average of about $80,000 a month. Now, a lot of this revenue, at least in the HVAC space, is going to be heavily loaded seasonally. And this is true for other home service businesses as well, where they have busy seasons and slow seasons where people spend more money on your particular service. But in the HVAC space for us, summer was the moneymaker as well as winter because we were in Colorado, which is a cold market. So there was also a heating season as well. But a $1 million business barely has enough revenue to support 2 or 3 employees performing the day-to-day tasks. And so the owner will still have to be pretty heavily involved in things that go on. But once you get to a $3 to $5 to $8 million business, you start to have enough critical mass to where you can have at least a mid-level manager or a person that is in a leadership position that is being groomed to be a higher level of management. So that way they can take advantage of things like systems and operations and policies and procedures, which are just not possible to take advantage of when you're a small 2 or 3 man company, because it's difficult to get to those economies of scale or a size where you can actually support the extra overhead of a manager to basically take care of all the day-to-day tasks. Now, there are ways to incentivize this depending on the particular home service company, and some home service companies have more margins than others, but a lot of them have a very similar profit structure. And in those smaller numbers, that business is actually going to receive a lower multiple. And if you don't know what a multiple is, I'll explain what that is in a second. A multiple is the number that your revenue gets multiplied by, and it's not your revenue, but it's actually your net earnings. So when they look at your EBITDA, or earnings before taxes, depreciation, and amortization, what they're looking at is that's the number of money that the business is making in a year. They'll look at a few years of financials, and then they multiply that by a number based on how big your business is and how valuable it is. When you're selling your company, you have to think about the things that are important to the person that's buying it. So one is as little work as you can do, the better. That's going to help out your brand as much as possible. And the second thing is what I just talked about, and that's brand. Now, what is brand? Well, brand is different than marketing, and they're oftentimes confused. But what brand is brand is the actual difference between a no-name knockoff and a particular brand. Like this jacket, for example, I'm wearing is Patagonia. But why would I spend $200 on this jacket when I could get a cheaper version on Amazon, probably for $30? That's the perception of the value behind a given brand. And in the home services space, people pay for brand related to the biggest thing is customer service. And so the home services space, if you have a company that has no real online reputation, or maybe 5-star reviews, or they had a couple of 5-star reviews, maybe don't have any reviews, or maybe they even have some bad reviews because they just don't do a good job of getting their happy customers to post reviews. And so they don't even pay attention to their online reputation. And this is very much the story that you hear with contractors that have been in business for years that maybe have established a customer base of 20 or 30,000 customers, literally decades, and they haven't had the need to advertise. And so they don't even pay attention to what their ranking is on Google. But if you're buying a newer business or you're selling a business and you're wanting to maximize your business value, the best thing you can do in any home services, this is especially true for HVAC, is maximize your 5-star ratings and the amount of reviews you do. Now, can do this in a couple ways, but the easiest way to do this is to use a service like Nice Job that gathers reviews on your behalf. There's other ones out there. I like Nice Job because they were affordable and they were relatively easy to use, and it was very effective at getting this done. Now, reviews are one way to build brand, but on top of that, people want to know is how recognizable is your brand. So when I sold my company, the name of our company was the B Heat and AC, and we had bright yellow vans. We had very visible branding. People, when we would come to their house, they would say things like, oh, we've seen your trucks all over town. And that's what you want, because when people see that truck driving around all over town, they're going to see the brand. And so when buyers are trying to buy your company, and a lot of the buyers in the space right now are private equity groups, and they see two different companies, and one is just a generic company that maybe has generic vans. They might be white, or they might have just a basic logo on it. And then there's another one that has, a bright color to it, or it has something that stands out a little bit more. They're going to place a little bit higher value on the brand that sticks out a little bit more, that has a reputation. And it doesn't even have to be catchy or unique. It can be Bob's Plumbing, but if it's Bob's Plumbing and it's a bright blue and orange color and it sticks out and it looks professional and it looks presentable, buyers are going to like that, because they know that customers like that. Because what happens is, when you just show up in a white van with no lettering on it, do you look like a shady company, or do you look like a company that has established a good reputation and good branding? If you have established good reputation and good branding, why are you driving around in a shady white van that has no lettering, no markings on it? Those bright vans or colorful van, what it does is it stands out and lets people know. It gives them a sense of comfort that you're not a fly-by-night company and you're not trying to hide. You're a real company. You are marketing yourself. You're putting your name out there. And that means if you do something bad, someone is going to talk about it, because you're the guys in the big bright vans and they're going to know about it. And so it gives people a sense of comfort, and it just comes across as comforting. Now, the next thing you can do, and this is where a lot of business owners, and I know this is where I actually struggled, and this is what I worked on the last year before I sold, not because I was actually planning on selling. My sale came by a surprise because I had some life changes and some circumstance changes that made me want to sell, because I wanted to pursue other things. The biggest thing you can do to make your business more valuable is work on processes. This is where the term SOPs comes into play, and that stands for standard operating procedures. And when you create a standard operating procedure, this is what it looks like. When the phone rings, Sally answers the phone, or Bob answers the phone, then Bob schedules this call in a 2-hour window at the first available, or however this certain call is handled. Then it goes to the technician. The technician does this to confirm and coordinate communication. They call the customer. They do XYZ to make sure that the customer is taken care of. They collect payment, and then they confirm with the office, and then they get their next service call. You might say, oh yeah, that's how we do things. But if you don't have it written down in a manual, you don't have an SOP. You just have a bunch of shit in your head that the people who are buying your company aren't going to know that shit, and they need to know it, because otherwise your company has no value, because they're not going to be able to duplicate what you've created if you just say, oh, trust me, everyone at the company knows what to do. They want to know what people at the company are supposed to do, because they need to, if they're going to come in and buy that company from you, they're going to come in and take over management, and they need to be able to hold people accountable. When people say, where am I supposed to be? They need to know where to be able to tell them to go and how everything runs at the company. Now, the other processes that are important to have are things like checklists and operational processes that improve your customer experience. So if you have surveys that get sent out, a checklist that gets done on every single job, whether it's a repair or whether it's a new system installation or whatever service company you're running, what's going to happen is that checklist adds another layer of value. You have to understand, especially savvy buyers, when they are buying a company, when they see all these checklists and they see systems, they see operations, they see that you have an asset that's streamlined into certain things, what they know is that they're buying an asset where people are used to things going a certain way. And that gives them value because, again, there's going to be a written record of how everything is done, adds value to the asset. And this brings me kind of into the next process that I want to talk about that is most important, or one of the most important ones, and that's your sales process and your marketing process. And where these come into play is when you have a lead come in, how does that lead get handled? Because where a lot of business owners are leaving money on the table, I know I was, and it was staggering to me. It just opened my eyes when I looked at how many millions of dollars in open estimates we had on the past 12-month basis that had not been followed up with. And when I saw the amount of low-hanging fruit we had in terms of unsold jobs and unsold estimates, I realized that our sales process was not as optimized as it could be. And so the way a sales process works is who makes the sales call, who makes the follow-up calls, and who monitors that this is getting done. And normally that's why these companies that are above that $5 to $8 million threshold start to get more valuable, because they have a sales manager in place that's tracking the sales guys. And so if you have 3 sales guys and you have a sales manager that's monitoring their sales, they know whether follow-up calls are getting made, they know what the closing ratio is, they know all the things they are doing to maximize revenue and therefore lower your lead cost and your customer acquisition cost. If you have a 20% close ratio and you bring that to 30%, that's a 50% improvement in your revenue. theoretically, all other constraints considered equal. That's why documenting the sales process is not just going to make you more money before you sell it, because that's just an added benefit, but it's also going to be really important to the people who are buying your business. Now, the same thing is true for marketing process. When you look at marketing, it's how your leads are handled. There's a lot that goes into this, so I'm not going to talk about go high level or lead funnels or things like that, but really optimizing your marketing process so that leads are handled in an efficient way. We had a lot of automations at our company where customers were reached up with automated follow-up in addition to manual follow-up done by technicians and people at the office. And so we really tried to stay on top of and maximize anyone that called our company, not just because we're trying to make more money, but it's also because we're trying to serve the customer better, because I've had the experience of trying to give my money to a company and I call them once, I call them twice, they don't call me back or they don't email me back, I send them another email and then they completely blow me off. It is the fucking rudest thing you can do to a customer. And so we try not to be rude. You want to make sure that your customers are being taken care of. And so incorporating that into your marketing process, make sure that all your leads are being handled, and you will still have some slip through the cracks because they maybe made a phone call but didn't leave a voicemail, and so it got marked as spam, but they thought they left a voicemail, but their call got disconnected first. That's why having a marketing process that covers all these things. So like if you get a missed call and someone from the sales team calls that person back, they're going to be impressed that you guys are on it. The sale starts before they're even in the home. And we'll talk about a couple more things that will help you maximize your revenue and maximize the value of your business. But before we do that, if you're enjoying this content so far, please hit the like button for the algorithm and consider subscribing to the channel. We put out daily and weekly content on how to grow and scale your business and how to exit your business. And so if this is a topic you're interested in, subscribing is a free way that you can support the channel, and it is much appreciated. And one of the best things you can do for your business is diversify revenue streams. And here's what I mean by that. If you're an HVAC company, basically two types of revenue that they're going to look at. They're going to look at repeat revenue and they're going to look at one-time revenue. And when I say they, I'm talking about the buyer of your company. So when a buyer looks at your business, if they see a bunch of $100,000 sales, back to back to back, and they're going to say, oh, wow, that's impressive. You have a lot of high ticket sales coming in. How often does that happen? If that sale has let's say a 20-year life cycle, they're going to look at that purchase as not something that happens all the time from that customer, so that customer is not as valuable to them. But if they look and they see, oh wow, you have this $500 purchase that occurs every single month, and it's a $500 monthly recurring revenue stream, or $6,000 a year in recurring revenue stream, and they say, what is this for and what is this service? They will value that recurring revenue at a much higher multiple. And this is where memberships or maintenance agreements come into play. Now, there's different levels of maintenance agreements and membership agreements that people will sell depending on what business you're in, and some will have a higher need than others. For example, HVAC was a relatively easy or in-demand item that people wanted because they were normally relatively affordable, around $200 a year per complete package system. And these systems, these maintenance agreements, the reason you wanted them is because it got you in the customer's house every single year, and so you would keep their system in good working order, but it was also an opportunity to catch something before it breaks, and therefore keep your guys busy doing work or repair work in the off season or the slow season, because you've run these maintenance agreements in the slow season. The same thing can be done when you look at a pool route. Like, why are pool routes so valuable, or landscaping services? Well, landscaping services have a very repeat business model where if you have an operationalized landscaping company, that is worth a lot of money, because people are looking that this revenue comes in every month because you go there twice a month to cut the grass, you go there once a quarter to do fertilizer or mulch something or whatever you do on a particular property. And because that's a recurring revenue stream, it's going to look a lot more valuable when you go to sell your business, because they're going to say, oh, this company has $1 million a year in regular revenue, but they have $500,000 a year, and they might value that $500,000 a year at a 5x multiple or even more, depending on the size of the company, and they'll value the regular revenue at, a 2 to 4x multiple or more, depending on how big your company is. There's a lot of factors that go into play. The types of revenue and diversifying into those types of revenue is one of the best things you can do. This is why also incorporating work for repeat vendors like property managers or things like that is a great thing that you can do, because if you get a property manager that you're doing work for as a service company or something else, that is also valued a little bit differently, as that looks like repeat revenue. It's also tends tends to be at a tighter margin because those companies tend to want some sort of discount, and they're not really as much of a premium customer. They're premium in the sense that they pay on a recurring basis, and that is very valuable, but they don't pay as high of a margin because they know what stuff costs. And so they probably have some other vendors that can provide it to them cheaper. But if you can provide it to them better and a little bit more consistent, and they like your customer service and you're easier to deal with, they will favor you. And we have property managers that use us, and they're like, hey, listen, we can get this done for $500 less. I don't know if you can match that. And sometimes we couldn't because we were already discounting it, but they would still choose us just because we were reliable, or more reliable than the next guy, right? It's hard to be reliable in this business because there's so many variables, because you're taking a vehicle, you're driving it to a job site. And so cars can break down, guys can call in sick, things happen. But if you have a reputation of being reliable, people will use you on a regular basis. And one of the last things we'll talk about, that is last but definitely not least, is your financials. Now, having good financials is critical, and I'll talk about, you might have better financials than what I'm going to suggest, but what you want at a minimum, especially when you're selling your business, is you want to have financials that are prepared on an accrual basis, and you want them to be prepared monthly. Now, this is mostly true if you have a business that's doing over $1 million in revenue. And I've heard people say, oh, you don't need to switch to accrual until you're over $3 million in revenue. I say that's bullshit. I switched my business to accrual accounting when I was at 1.3 million in revenue, because on a cash basis, I had allegedly made $250,000 and it just didn't feel right. And I was asking my accountant, I was like, where's the money then? Because I'm broke. Why am I broke if I did 1.3 million in sales and I made $250,000? And what happened was, lo and behold, we switched to accrual accounting with a different accountant, and they looked at my numbers, and I had made $40,000 that year. Well, that's a big difference, 4% margin on 1.3 million. That's a very, very tight margin. That money was gone, is basically the gist of it, which explained why we were in debt, and we had to adjust prices, and we adjusted some things in the company, and we recovered from that. You know, how is someone going to buy your business or know what it's worth if they can't even see how much money it's actually making? That's why financials are so important, because if they can see that you're on an accrual basis, and the basic difference between cash and accrual, for anyone who doesn't know, you only record an event at the time that you receive cash for something or you pay cash for something, which it could be on a credit card, but that's fine. It'll still be accounted for in the books. Let's say I get a bill from a vendor for $10,000 for equipment, but I don't put that bill for $10,000 into the books, which you don't do on a cash basis, you do it on an accrual basis. Then that $10,000 debt isn't actually accounted for in my accounting system. And so what happens is you could end up in a position where you think you're making more money than you're not, because you might be hoarding cash or saving cash in the slow season and not paying vendors, and then you're stretching your liabilities, where you might owe vendors more than you think, and then suddenly you find yourself in a position where you're months behind on vendor payments, and you're like, wait, I made all this money this year, where is this money? And you actually didn't make any money because your margins got eroded. And this happened to a lot of businesses during the pandemic for obvious reasons. We had crazy inflation. Everything was getting more expensive. People's businesses' margins were getting eroded, and they didn't even know it unless they had good accounting and good financials. And we're going to talk about one more thing, and it's honestly probably the most important thing, and that is that if you want to sell your company for top dollar, you don't want to be the cheap guy. And here's what I mean. If people are doing business with you because you have the lowest price, and that's the only reason they're doing business with you, then you are the cheap guy, which means you haven't built brand, you don't have a good reputation, or if you do have a good reputation, you're not charging for it, or your reputation is built around how good your prices are. And the truth is you don't want to be the Walmart of home services or the Walmart of HVAC. And Walmart is not have the lowest prices because they want to help customers or consumers. They have the lowest prices because they lower the price $1 or 1% to the customer, but they lower their product acquisition cost by 50% from what everyone else is paying. So if you buy a blender at Walmart and you buy that same blender at Target, Target pays more money than Walmart paid for that blender by a long shot. And that's the secret to how Walmart makes all their money. So they are not saints that are just lowering prices for everyone so they can save money. They are cutthroat business people that are giving business owners or manufacturers the shaft when they buy their products, because they do not pay what every other person or every other company that buys that product pays. They pay a lot less, and that's where they make their money, is on the back end by having a lower product cost or a lower cost of goods sold. Now, these are strategies you can do when you get bigger. And when I say bigger, I mean an 8-figure plus business, because you have more pull and you have more purchasing power. And so your vendors will really want to earn your business because you're purchasing a lot of equipment from them on an annual basis. But when when you are dealing with customers, what you want is you want customers that view you as a premium option that has added value. And that value will be that you value your customers, you provide excellent customer service, you show up when you say you're going to show up. Maybe an added value is that all your guys are background checked. Maybe they're all drug tested, whatever the case is. Colorado is kind of hard to drug test because marijuana is legal. But ironically, most people in the HVAC trade, even though we're in Colorado, people don't really smoke pot. And so it's not a big thing. But the big thing is do whatever you have to do to add value to your brand. And the truth is, honestly, in Colorado, most people don't give a shit if you smoke weed anyways. They just care if you show up, if you're on time, if you're presentable. Obviously, don't show up. These are common sense things. That's not what I'm insinuating. Being a company that takes an interest in adding more value and therefore attracting a premium customer that does have a higher standard, meaning they're going to want you to show up when you say you show up, they're going to want you to show up and look presentable and be clean, and they're going to want to see a tangible value or difference that they're paying for. For us, this is why we spent the extra money on Sprinter vans when we could have gotten other vans that were cheaper. The Sprinters carried a premium, but they were more reliable when we had way less downtime than we did with the Ford Transits. But an all-wheel drive Transit is $60,000, whereas an all-wheel drive or a four-wheel drive Sprinter is $80,000, which results in a little bit higher payment, a little bit higher insurance premium, but that Sprinter had way less downtime. And so for one day of downtime that I might have with a Ford Transit van, we didn't have as much downtime with the Sprinter vans, and that's why we ran those, and we took a very rigorous maintenance schedule to make sure that that was not another reason that we had to cancel on a customer, because there are plenty of reasons, plenty of things that will come up in the busy season that will prevent you from servicing the customer, like guys calling in sick or guys getting worked too hard and they're tired, because you've got to get when the getting's good, make hay when the sun's shining, so to speak. And so especially in seasonal businesses, this is especially true, where if your guys are working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks in your busy months, you want to make sure that you are reducing the amount of reasons that they call in, and having a reliable vehicle was something that we just thought was so important. And so did our customers, and we were able to justify our premium for that. Because the customers who are hiring us, they would look and say, oh, that's a nice van. Okay, these guys are reliable, they're presentable, they're all in uniform. Those are the things that are going to add value to your company, to where people say, okay, this is a legit company. It's not just a bunch of guys running around in their own pickup trucks and t-shirts. They're a legit company. They do good work. They're not fly by night, and it adds value for your brand. So those are some of the things you can do to sell your HVAC or your service company for top dollar. And if you're interested in knowing how much I sold my company for and how that process actually went down and why I sold my business, that video will be popping up here shortly. And if you found this content enjoyable, please hit the like button for the algorithm and consider subscribing to the channel, because we put out a lot of free content on the topic of growing and scaling your business. So if you found it enjoyable, it's a free way you can support the channel so that we can continue to grow. And as mentioned earlier, if you're in the market to sell your company, there's a link in the description where we can connect you with a business broker. So check that out if you're interested, and we'll catch you on the next episode.